Good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Stevens, and I'm a member of BMSS Advisors and CPAs in the River Chase office here in Birmingham. BMSS was established in 1991 and has grown to become one of the top 100 accounting and advisory firms in the U.S. With over 375 employees across our family of companies, we assist clients in a variety of industries and services, providing accounting, advisory, IT, payroll, PEO, and wealth solutions in an effort to bring our clients peace of mind and provide exceptional client service. Additionally, we're an independent member of the BDO Alliance USA, a nationwide association of independently owned local and regional accounting, consulting, and service firms with similar client service goals. For more information about our firm, you can visit www.bmss.com. Abacus Technologies, also based in Birmingham, Alabama, specializes in offering customized cybersecurity, managed IT services, and business intelligence solutions that help companies unleash their full potential. With more than 25 years of industry experience, Abacus Technologies has assisted numerous businesses in navigating the ever-changing technology landscape. By doing so, they have enabled companies to overcome today's challenges while also guiding them toward a more promising and accessible tomorrow. We'd like to thank you for taking the time this morning for this morning's webinar. BMSS Family of Companies presents Understanding SOC Audits, Enhancing Trust and Compliance for Your Business. Before we get started, there are just a couple of housekeeping items to mention. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to use the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. We will answer all questions at the end of the presentation, which should last about an hour this morning. After the presentation, we'll open up the Q&A session. There will also be polling questions. If you'd like to receive CPE credit, please answer those as they pop up. We are very fortunate and excited to have Corbin Parker with us this morning to talk about SOC reporting. Let me give you some background information about him. Corbin is a manager of information assurance and risk advisory for Abacus Technologies. During his career, Corbin has performed over 100 SOC audits for companies of all sizes, ranging from startups to multi-billion-dollar in revenue. Prior to joining Abacus Technologies, he worked in the banking industry, assessing SOC, ISO 27001, and PCI DSS reports as a member of the third-party risk management department. Corbin is a graduate of Auburn University with a degree in information systems management and is also a certified information systems auditor. And with that, welcome again, and let's dive right in. I'm going to turn it over to Corbin.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for joining, and happy March Madness to all who celebrate. I almost couldn't sleep last night thinking about how excited I am to talk about risk, third-party risk management, and how SOC plays an integral role in that process. We'll talk about how a company can prepare for a successful audit, the business impact of SOC compliance, and as Scott said, have some Q&A discussion. And for some of you, this may be your first introduction to SOC. And if so, I hope you come away with an understanding of what it provides to various organizations. If this is not a new topic to you, I hope you leave with at least having learned something new. And if you're just here for the CP credits, I might need your help by submitting some questions for the Q&A portion, as Scott has suggested. If I blow through this too quickly and we have no questions at the end, I will happily crack the SOC 1 guide open and read you a few pages. And there is a polling question there if all of you would like to answer and get that app permissioned CPE. Okay. So as I was developing this presentation, I did go back and forth a bit on how deep into the weeds we need to go here. I really do want to make this digestible to everyone. But Scott made a great point yesterday. If you have joined this webinar, then you must have some level of interest in SOC. So to really understand what its purpose is and what it provides to organizations, we are going to get into the weeds a little bit. So stay with me and we will tie it back together in the end. So first, we'll go through the agenda. What is risk, third-party risk management, SOC, the path to a successful audit, the business impact, and then wrap up in Q&A. So up first, what is risk? I think we all know what that means to us. We see it every day in some form or fashion. Speeding. I think let's be honest with ourselves. We all do it. We want to get there a few minutes quicker, but you do risk a ticket or, God forbid, an accident. Gas station sushi. There's certainly risk involved here, uh, but I'm sure someone here has been willing to accept that at some point. The snooze button on your phone, that is my favorite button, and I take that risk just about every morning. We all know that's the best sleep you can get, but you run the risk of being late to work or missing today's SOC webinar. I know no one wants to do that. And like people, organizations also face various types of risk. So today we'll be talking about organizational IT risk. And in this context, the definition of risk is likelihood times impact. Uh, Likelihood is the probability of a specific scenario occurring, and the impact being essentially what happens if that scenario does occur. And with risk, you have inherent and residual risk. Inherent is the level of risk that exists naturally in a system, process, or environment before any controls or mitigation strategies are applied to it. And residual risk is essentially what's left over. It's the risk that can't be entirely eliminated after taking those precautionary measures. It's very unlikely in this context that risk can be entirely eliminated if you do choose to engage with the process or scenario that is introducing that risk in the first place. So companies can generally do four things with risk. You can avoid it by essentially not engaging in that specific action or opportunity. You can mitigate it by applying processes and procedures to reduce the likelihood or impact of that risk. You can transfer it. Insurance is an example of that in the real world, and maybe more so in this context. A company can purchase cybersecurity insurance to offset or lessen the cost of a security breach, for example. Or with risk, you can just accept it. It's the cost of doing business sometimes. It is what it is. And every organization has a very unique risk profile. It is almost never static. That's why organizations, when they're considering risk, they should be assessing this continuously. Annually, you should be going back and performing a risk assessment internally to determine what risks are facing your specific organization. Because next year, when you come back to it, things are probably going to change, whether it's from the competitive landscape or some system changes that have happened internally. It's never the same. Diving deeper into risk, we have third-party risk, and that is getting closer to the central topic of today's webinar. But organizations are ever increasingly outsourcing services, even those that are critical to the operation of the business, to third parties or vendors. Think cloud providers, AWS, Azure, GCP, software vendors. Any software that even us in the family of companies are using internally, or for any external people that have joined, whatever software you're using in the company, chances are that it was not developed internally and it has been given to you by a third party. Managed service providers like us at Abacus. Not every company, it doesn't make sense for them to have a fully staffed IT department from a financial sense. So companies will engage Abacus to come in as a managed service provider and be that IT department for them. But we are a third party. And this relationship, it influences the organization's risk profile. It can be positive or negative, just depending on what the situation is. Different types of third-party risk, data breaches, malware, ransomware introduced via vendor systems for cybersecurity risk, compliance and regulatory, failure to meet legal or industry standards through the actions or non-actions of a vendor. Operational risk, downtime or performance issues from a third party affecting your operations. Think of a cloud provider, co-location data center. If you're hosting all of your applications and your business runs out of that data center, what happens if it goes down? Can you continue your operations, or do you have to shut down for an undisclosed period of time until they can stand it back up? That's a risk you have to consider if you're paying someone else to host your infrastructure. There's also reputational risk. You can receive negative publicity due to a vendor's mishandling of sensitive data or services, even though in a lot of these scenarios, if a vendor is the cause of a breach or an incident, you really are the victim of that. But if you lose your customer's data, no one's feeling sorry for you. It will cause a risk to your reputation. So why does it matter? The interconnected nature of IT systems means that a vulnerability in one vendor can impact your entire organizations. How does an organization manage these risks? Believe you me, we will discuss it, but first, a few case studies. Target. Everyone knows and loves Target. In the holiday season of 2013, hackers gained access to their network and exfiltrated financial and personal information of 110 million customers. This included names, physical addresses, email addresses, credit card numbers, social security numbers, pretty much everything a company can have on you. The cause of this breach happened to be a small HVAC company located in rural Pennsylvania. The investigation concluded that this company did not follow very broadly accepted information security practices. This allowed for a vulnerability in the HVAC company's network to escalate into a breach in Target's network. Turned out they had, for some reason, network access to be able to handle billing and scheduling in the different Target locations. As a result of this, Target was ordered to pay an $18.5 million settlement after the court case and was estimated to have lost up to $200 million due to the impact to its public reputation, and earnings fell 46%. Ticketmaster. Between February and June of 2018, so several months, hackers obtained the personal data and payment card information of 40,000 customers from the UK. Turns out that Ticketmaster was using one of those third-party chatbots that we all know and love. And with the company that developed that chatbot, a vulnerability in their system allowed malicious code to be injected into that chatbot that was able to capture every single input of the ticket purchasing process. They were ordered to pay a fine of 1.25 million pounds, and the settlement amount was not disclosed, but is rumored to be in the millions. So the textbook definition of third-party risk management is the systematic process that organizations use to identify, assess, mitigate, and monitor risks arising from their relationships with external vendors, suppliers, and service providers. To carry out this process, organizations rely on independent attestations to provide the information necessary to answer the all-important question, can we trust you? And I do want you all to understand that this is the core of what we offer with SOC. It's trust. We can never offer absolute assurance, but we can provide the information necessary for organizations to make a very informed decision on whether or not a business relationship is worth the risk. There are several types of independent attestations that a company can obtain, such as ISO 27001, PCI DSS, iTrust. But in the United States, a SOC report is the industry standard. To the point of today's topic, system and organization controls, also known as SOC. So a SOC report is designed to provide assurance to customers, regulators, and other stakeholders about the effectiveness of a service organization's internal controls. technically, there are more than this, but we won't go too deep into that today. That is a topic for another day. Generally, there are three types of SOCs: a SOC 1, a SOC 2, and a SOC 3. And today, on the SOC 3 specifically, we won't touch on this one very much. They are just a publicly distributable version of a SOC 2, and they do not contain confidential proprietary information. Just given the level of information that's contained in a SOC 1 or SOC 2 report, you, as an organization, you should require whoever externally that is reading that report to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And SOC 3 is pretty much the answer if they want to distribute that to in a more public fashion or post it on their website. If they feel so inclined, use it as a piece of marketing material. SOC audits are based on the frameworks and criteria established by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, also known as the AICPA, who we all know and love here at BMSS. SOC 1, the framework, we use SSAE 18, Statement on Standards for Attestation Engagements, as the overarching guidance to execute the audit, and they focus on ICFR, also known as Internal Control over Financial Reporting. SOC 2 engagements are focused on the AICPA's trust services criteria. And again, believe you me, we will go through those. And a licensed CPA must provide the report opinion. You don't have to be a CPA to work on a SOC audit. I am not a CPA myself, but one such as Scott Stevens must provide EQR and sign the overall report opinion. SOC 1 reports. We have a polling question. I'll give you guys a few seconds to answer that one. You all would love more information about SOC audits. All right, SOC 1 reports. So SOC 1 focuses on internal control over financial reporting. The main question that they are there to answer is, how does the service organization's product or service affect the completeness and accuracy of the user entity's financial reporting? Two terms that you will see pretty frequently throughout this presentation are service organization and user entity. When I say service organization, I'm referring to the company that is going through the audit. They are providing that service, and the user entity is the customer, the user of that service. So the SOC 1 report, the service organization, the function that they are providing, the service they are providing to user entities, it can affect the completeness and accuracy of their financial statements and reports that go through their own audits at the end of each year. So companies that will obtain a SOC 1 report, they're doing some sort of financial reconciliations, payroll processing, transaction processing, loan servicing, or claims processing is such that would be done by some sort of middleman in the insurance industry. All right. So SOC 1s are, the meat of those reports they're built off control objectives and controls. So control objectives are the statements, for lack of a better term, a service organization is making about the end goal of the internal controls they have in place, really just what purpose they serve. And the control objectives in a SOC 1 will generally be focused on the completeness and accuracy of financial data, as well as the IT general controls, or ITGCs, for systems that store, interact, or process the financial data. There's not a specific set of guardrails that are in place for how SOC 1 control objectives are designed, but they will generally follow the same format as we go through the design for these with the client. These will most likely be a little more tailored to that specific client or service than they will be in a SOC 2. But an example control objective in a SOC 1 could be something like controls provide reasonable assurance that loan payments are processed in a timely manner and customer accounts are kept up to date. Another common theme you'll see here is I am saying reasonable assurance. As I mentioned earlier, we can never provide absolute assurance. And to test out or to accomplish the goal set out by the control objectives, we test the controls they have in place to support that objective. SOC 1 controls. And the control activities, as I said, are the functions and processes that a business performs in support of each control objective. Uh, an example control activity that falls under the objective that we just looked at could look something like payments received via autopay are automatically processed and applied to customers as accounts. Payments are monitored to ensure the completeness and accuracy of customer accounts. Another common theme, completeness and accuracy. In this control, we're auditing the configurations to ensure that this process is in fact automated and works as intended, as well as checking to see that they have monitoring in place to mitigate the risk that the automated process does not work as intended. SOC 2 reports. So it's a little different than a SOC 1. It focuses on a service organization's compliance with one or more of the 5 trust services criteria as defined by the AICPA. Security, also known as the common criteria, it has to be included in every SOC 2. And then you have availability, confidentiality, privacy, and processing integrity as the a la carte options. And you may be wondering, what do these all mean on the edge of your seats? Don't you worry. Security. Purpose of this criteria is provides reasonable assurance that the system is protected against unauthorized access, both physical and logical, to safeguard assets from potential threats and vulnerabilities. So this first control, just I have a few example controls for all these criteria. I hope these kind of tie it together so you can see the purpose and just what purpose these different criteria serve. Uh, First example control, all transmissions of electronic information from and to the production environment are encrypted as the default setting of public networks via secure transmission protocols. So this first control, we're just making sure that data in transit is encrypted as it travels in between networks. If it was in plain text, that would be bad. It is susceptible to something like a man-in-the-middle attack from a cybersecurity perspective. I hope Jonathan over at Abacus is shaking his head in agreement. With the second control, the ability to deploy application the ability to deploy application and infrastructure changes are limited to appropriate administrators. And with the second control, we're essentially making sure the ability to deploy code changes to the production environment are restricted to only the personnel that should be capable of doing so, as well as ensuring that no one can unilaterally develop and promote their own code, making sure they are operating on the great principle of least privilege. Availability. Companies like, as I mentioned earlier, data centers, cloud providers, or any service that requires a certain level of uptime, this is generally promised contractually with their customers, will include availability in the scope of their SOC 2. So this first control, infrastructure supporting the in-scope system is located in 2 geographically separate locations with failover capabilities to ensure continued operations if a disaster were to occur. So this first control, we're making sure that if a natural disaster or act of God were to occur, that they're still capable of providing the service that they've agreed to provide to you. If a tornado comes and wipes out a data center, they should have the capability to fail over to a secondary site in a location that is geographically separate enough to have not been affected by the disaster itself. Second control, on an annual basis, the business continuity and disaster recovery plan is tested for effectiveness and execution capability. Corrective actions are documented and resolved. So the second control, we're making sure that they have a BCDR plan in place in the case of a disaster, and that is being tested at least annually to make sure they know how to execute it. If they find issues with their plan, are they documenting it? Are they resolving it? And for example, companies that had a fleshed out business continuity plan were able to transition more effectively to the work from home requirements during COVID. And with a SOC report, as since security is the common criteria, you know, we would have a control that tests their business continuity and disaster recovery plan. But we're really testing that the plan exists and is approved annually. But when you include the other options like availability, we're going to expand on that control and make sure they're testing it annually, that they can execute it, and that if they find something wrong with that plan, They're documenting what went wrong, and they're documenting the resolution of it. Confidentiality. The purpose of this criteria is to provide reasonable assurance that sensitive information is protected from unauthorized access or disclosure, ensuring that data designated as confidential remains secure. And with this criteria, we are focused more on just general data that a company would consider confidential, such as trade secrets, etc. And some example controls: access to confidential data is restricted to appropriate users based on job function. Goal is first controls, just making sure that the access is restricted to only those who need to access it to do the job they've been given. If you do not need access to the confidential data to perform your job functions, you simply should not have access to it. Again, the principle of least privilege. Second control, de-identified or dummy data is used in testing and development environments. The use of confidential or production data in these environments is restricted according to policy. So second control here, we're making sure that they aren't using live production or confidential data in a testing environment. Uh, Generally, testing environments will have a worse security posture than production. So we want to make sure that data that they are to protect is not just sitting in an unsafe location and vulnerable to being breached. Privacy provides reasonable assurance that personal information is collected, used, retained, and disposed of in accordance with applicable laws and the organization's privacy policies. So privacy, not too different from confidentiality, but it will focus more on how the company protects the personally identifiable information of people specifically. So their PII, we call it. There are various privacy laws and regulations that companies have to follow when they deal with that type of data, like HIPAA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, GDPR, etc. So these two controls, when a data subject requests his or her personal information, the company authenticates the individual's identity through a username and password, and upon authentication, provides the information to the individual. So with this control, we're testing alignment with those privacy laws and regulations. If Scott were to go to any website and request his data, they're going to make sure that this is in fact Scott Stevens requesting the data belonging to Scott Stevens and not Corbin Parker. Second control, consent is obtained before customer personal information is transferred to or from an individual computer or other similar device. Same idea, just making sure that there is explicit and documented consent before personal information is shared in alignment with those privacy laws. Processing integrity provides reasonable assurance that system processing is complete, accurate, timely, and authorized, ensuring that transactions and data are handled reliably. So for systems that are performing any kind of data manipulation or receive an input that must have a verifiably correct output, processing integrity comes into play. There is not too many differences between what would, for a company that would, do they need processing integrity and scope for a SOC 2, or do they need a SOC 1? For a SOC 2, if you have processing integrity and scope, it's the same idea as a SOC 1 in really testing the completeness and accuracy of the output of that system, but we're not really focused on financial data. We're focused on just other types of data. Just making sure the inputs into that system are monitored, that if there are any issues with that data, that those issues are alerted to, and processes are in place to ensure the output is correct. 2 + 2 = 4, not 5. All right. For a SOC report, they can be a type 1 or a type 2. You can have a SOC 1 type 1, a SOC 1 type 2, or a SOC 2 type 1, and a SOC 2 type 2. The difference between these two types is they're different. So a type 1 is, as auditors, we are expressing an opinion on the design of controls at a specific point in time. So we are coming in saying, in our opinion, these controls are suitably designed as of a specific date. For example, as of March the 20th, these controls were designed. They do, in fact, exist. In a type 2, we are expressing an opinion on the design and operating effectiveness of controls over a period of time. So for example, a type 2 report will have an audit period, say January 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2025. And essentially it has a look back period for us as auditors to test not only the design as we do in a type 1, but the operating effectiveness of those controls. Are they operating effectively as they were designed over that period of time? And so a common roadmap for an organization is for their first SOC report, it's going to be a type 1 and followed by a 3 or 6 month type 2 report, and then subsequently an annual 12-month type 2 report that at the same time each year they go through their SOC 1 or 2 type 2 audit. Type 2s can be, generally they're done either 3, 6, or 12 months. I guess technically they can have any combination, or they can be 1 through 12 if you want them to, but you generally only see 3, 6, or 12. So if we haven't already gotten into the weeds a little bit, we're going to go a little deeper. So these next 2 slides, we're getting into the weeds, but they are very important ideas to understand if you're looking at a SOC report. So one of those is subservice organizations. A subservice organization, or SSO, is a third party or vendor that performs a service that is critical to the operation of critical for the operation of the controls that are listed in the report. Essentially, they're the third parties of the service organization, and they have specific control responsibilities, and these controls must be operating effectively for the opinion in the report to be valid. And so there is a distinction between subservice organizations and vendors. All subservice organizations are vendors, but not all vendors are subservice organizations. To be classified as an SSO, from our perspective, the vendor must be performing a critical service to the operation of the system and scope in the SOC report. If that vendor were to disappear off the face of the planet tomorrow, would the service organization be able to abide by the principal service commitments that they've agreed to with their customers? And if that answer is no, call them an SSO. If not, most likely just a vendor. And at the end of the day, we as auditors can have our direct opinion on that. It is up to the client to define whether or not a vendor is a subservice organization. So as I was saying, polling question. I'll give you guys a few seconds to answer that. Get your CPE. All right. So as I was saying, if they are an SSO, there are some functions of internal control that they are performing that fall under the scope of the audit, and those are called complementary subservice organization controls, also known as CSOCs, and they must be operating effectively for the opinion to be valid. We rely on the service organization's third-party risk management procedures to ensure that they are monitoring the satisfactory completion of those controls. And the SSOs, just about them, what their name is, what actions they're performing, and the controls they are responsible for are listed in section 3 of the report. User entity controls, also known as in a SOC 2, user entity responsibilities. In a SOC 1, you'll see more complementary user entity controls. And when we say complementary, we are stating that those specific controls have to be operating effectively for the opinion to be valid. In a SOC 2, we point towards more user entity responsibilities, but for the simplicity of today's presentation, we will call them user entity controls. And they're the controls that the user entity, again, the user of the service organization being the one that's being audited, their customers, they must commit to performing these controls for the system to operate as intended and the opinion to be valid. So for example, if a user entity is responsible for sending a list of users that need access to the system that they are providing, the user entity has to have controls in place to make sure that they are requesting appropriate access for those individuals. It's not the service organization's fault if one of their customers submits them a list of users that need access to that system and one of those users actually doesn't need it. They are still performing the functions they have promised to do so in that report. It's the user's fault for sending them a bad list. And SSOs and UECs, they're really important to understand if you were to review a SOC report because they delineate the shared responsibility. It would be a very rare scenario where the service organization is end-to-end responsible for everything. You're just not really going to see it. All right, who reads a SOC report? You may be wondering. For a SOC 1, the intended reader is the financial auditor of a service organization's customer or business partner. As I was mentioning earlier, for a financial auditor auditing a company, as they're looking over their financial statements and they see that some of that data that they are using is coming from an external party, how do they know it is complete and accurate? They really don't. And so they trust what is the opinion that is stated in the SOC 1 report. It is really the puzzle piece that they use to fit together or to close the loop of information they're auditing. And a SOC 2 has it's a broader audience. So the intended readers are current and prospective customers, business partners, other auditors and compliance professionals, and management. So they'll show it to current customers for their annual third-party risk management procedures. They'll show it to prospective customers to show that, hey, you can in fact trust me. Business partners, again, you can trust me, et cetera. And management will use the result of that audit to make decisions internally. How do we execute the audit? So you can, for simplicity's sake, you can break the SOC audit into 5 steps. First of those being engagement acceptance. Due to the laws handed down by the AICPA, just like any other engagement, can we be independent and objective? That same rule applies here. Assuming we can, we go into the planning stage. What is the scope? What is the timeline? For the scope, we've got to define a boundary for the audit. Is for a company, we need to find, what department are they under? Is this a specific service offering? Is this a specific application? Where do we draw the line? Scope creep is a big thing, just like I'm sure with any audit. Just making sure that we narrow down, hey, what are we actually looking at? What are we trying to prove? And the timeline. When do you need this final report? Some clients for a SOC 1, if they have large enterprise customers, they're going to want to align the audit period for their SOC 1 with the fiscal end date for their largest customer to make sure that their largest customer's financial auditor has a report that has coverage for the entire period that they are auditing themselves. Design. So what are the control objectives for a SOC 1 or the criteria in a SOC 2 and the applicable controls for auditing? For a first-year client, this is going to be a pretty involved process. We'll run what we call a design call, and we'll learn everything we possibly can about how the business as a whole operates, and especially the in-scope system or process that we're auditing. We'll design the control objectives for the SOC 1 that are stating, here is what we are doing to ensure the completeness and accuracy of this financial data. And a SOC 2, we're going to decide, hey, are we doing just security? Are we including the other criteria? And which of the controls do you have in place? SOC 2 especially has a lot of flexibility with the controls that satisfy those criteria. There's we want to make sure that the controls are in alignment with the company's actual processes instead of just giving them a set of controls that they then have to change all of their processes internally to comply with them. We want to tailor it to the client as much as we can. So then we have field work. This is where we as auditors will spend most of our time throughout the audit. And this is when the client they're taking the document request list that we've provided them that is asking for every single piece of documentation that we need to do the audit. They're uploading it to us. We're following up with the client. We're having walkthrough calls. We observe them going through several different processes to test the operating effectiveness and design. We do our testing. We send it up to the members over at BMSS, and they provide that EQR and member review and the overarching approval. Field work will generally last, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks is going to be standard, assuming that all of our ducks are in a row, everyone is ready and has the availability. But it can stretch out to 6 weeks sometimes. It really just depends on the scope of the audit and the client specifically. And after all of that is said and done, we head into the reporting stage where we will draft and finalize the SOC report, which at the end of the day is what we're being paid for. That is the final deliverable. And with that report, we'll provide process improvements, things that aren't necessarily issues with the audit, but things that we say, hey, in our opinion, this is what we think you can improve on. It'll make the auditability of this control a little better. But they're not necessarily issues. They're not listed in the report. So what does a SOC report look like? I'm sure you are asking. I'll tell you. So there are up to 5 sections in a SOC report, generally 4, depending on the results of the audit. Section 1, report of the independent service auditor. The opinion is exactly what it sounds like. Based on what we have seen as the auditors, the opinion can be either unqualified or unmodified, which means a clean report and we did not find any deficiencies and the system is designed and or operating effectively for the period that was audited. Or it can be qualified. That means we have found a material deficiency, and you will get that answer if you read section 1 of the report. Section 2, management's assertion. Management's assertion is there to provide a clear, formal declaration of responsibility and accuracy, and it really forms the cornerstone of our work in validating the control environment. They're essentially saying, hey, what we have shown you is a fair representation of the system and scope. Section 3, the meat of the report, and it really is the narrative of the report. It provides the necessary context to understand the scope of the audit. It defines the boundaries of the system. It informs the stakeholders of necessary information, and it really serves as the basis for which we design and perform our testing. Section 4, this is where the specific control activities, testing procedures, and the results of those tests are documented. If you ever look through a SOC report, this is a very long table. Essentially, it's the criteria or the control objective we're testing, each specific control, as the auditors, what our testing procedures were, and the results of that testing, which is either no exceptions noted or exceptions noted, and what the issue was that we found. So section 5, this is, as I said, not always included, but we will generally include this section when there are exceptions noted during testing, and we allow management to provide a response here, stating what happened how it happened and just a little more in depth on the situation and really what they're doing to prevent it from happening in the future. Or if they just want to include some additional information in there, some plan system changes, product offerings, they're more than welcome to. We as auditors explicitly state in the report that we provide no opinion on what is stated in Section 5, and it's up to them to tell the truth in that section and really say what they want to say. Doesn't have to be an exception to make use of that section. All right. What makes a strong SOC report? Polling question. Give you guys a few seconds. All right. Unfortunately, not all SOC reports are the product of an audit that really aligns with the standards that the beautiful blue SOC badge infers. There are what I like to call fake audits, and they are easy to spot when you know what you're looking for. So you should see strong controls and testing procedures. When looking through Section 4, you'll see how the auditor is testing that control, and it should provide coverage for really each statement that is made in that control activity. Say the control states that application changes are tested and approved prior to promotion into the production environment. The testing procedure shouldn't just be the auditor inquiring of the software development manager and asking if they do this. If you see just an inquiry for that control, they did not audit it. They should be checking the policy stating that that specific procedure is documented explicitly and approved by management. You should check for configurations in the source code tools such as GitHub or Azure DevOps, making sure that that configuration is enforced and you can't just skip it if you wanted to. Sample some changes that were made over the audit period and make sure that those controls were indeed tested and approved before they were promoted. That is the actual audit piece of testing these controls. So if you don't see it, it's not an audit. Unqualified opinion. It's your indicator that the audit didn't have any major findings. But going back to Section 4, if the testing is poor, there was never a chance to fail anyways. So take this one with a grain of salt. If you're reviewing a SOC report from a third-party risk management perspective and you see unqualified opinion and check the box, close the document, you're not reviewing it. Just because it's an unqualified opinion does not mean what you think it might mean in that moment. You need to compare it with the rest of the document to ensure that it is a quality audit. There should be clearly defined CSOCs and UECs. The shared responsibility in the operation of the system should be very clearly defined and mapped back to the specific criteria that those controls are providing coverage for. The Section 3, the system description, it should be comprehensive. It should provide clear boundaries of the system, and you should have a pretty good understanding of how it all works under the hood after you read it. If you have no idea what's happening in the system after you read Section 3, it's not comprehensive, and they didn't do the work they needed to do in this audit. So I'll say all this to say, from a third-party risk management perspective, just because someone has a SOC report, unfortunately doesn't always mean what it should mean. You should do an actual review of that report to make sure it is providing the value that they are saying it should provide to you. The path to a successful audit. How can a company prepare for such an endeavor? This first point is generally everyone's least favorite, and understandably so, but it is extremely important. Processes and business functions should be documented via policies and procedures. No one loves building a set of policies, but one of the core principles of the audit work we do is, are you doing what you say you're doing? If we can't map back what you're doing to what you promised you would do, we can't really verify the intent. We can't point back to something you say that you were going to do. Uh, you need to prepare or be prepared to have a clear audit trail of documentation or system evidence for the operation of the controls. If you can't prove it happened, it never did. From an audit perspective, you can't show me going from point A to point D without showing the B and C. It's part of it. You've got to have internal stakeholder buy-in. You know, if the departments aren't willing to allocate the necessary time, personnel, and financial resources to implement and maintain the required controls, it's not going to go the way you want it to go. It costs money to implement and maintain these controls. It costs money to implement a SIEM and internal scanning tools, but that's part of staying compliant. Now, there's not a way around a lot of the core ideals of being SOC compliant. And for a company that's never gone through a SOC audit, I would highly, highly suggest look into doing a readiness assessment. It's essentially a dry run of a type 1 audit. The auditors, like myself, will get with you. We'll design the control objectives or nail down the criteria and let you do a practice run of the audit. We'll test the controls just like we would during the actual audit. And instead of a report, we will provide you with a gap analysis that states, hey, if this was a real audit, you would have issues here, here, and here. We'll give you time to remediate those issues, and then we roll straight into the audit so you know what to expect. And it really makes the process a lot smoother and stress-free. So the impact of being SOC compliant. 2023 survey from the AICPA, they noted a 49% increase in demand for SOC-related engagements between 2018 and 2020, and a 42% increase between 2021 and 2023. And this does indicate a growing importance placed on IT security within organizations. I know that may not be the most unbiased resource, but I do believe that. The demand for SOC 1 engagements has remained consistently strong for the same period due to their critical role in enhancing transparency, accountability, and trust in the financial reporting process. So what can you expect when you can prove that you have become SOC compliant? You can attract enterprise clients. I can speak from experience and say, if you are say a software vendor and you want to get into the enterprise space in terms of the clients you are servicing, it's going to be a non-negotiable. They're not going to look at you if you don't have one, and if you don't have one, your competitors most certainly will. It removes barriers to acquiring new clients. It provides a certain level of immediate trust. A lot of companies, as they onboard new clients, and if they don't have any sort of third-party attestation report, they are hit with a security questionnaire. Some of these can be up to 1,000 questions, and a questionnaire for one customer you cannot fill out and send to everyone else. It is a lot more simple to deny filling out that security questionnaire and handing them your SOC 2 report. Just the continuous assessment nature of a SOC report, giving that you are doing it each year, it's going to make sure that it strengthens your cybersecurity posture over time, just given how closely you are looking at it yourselves and a third set of eyes. And a thorough audit will allow for a more accurate cost-benefit analysis for IT investments. It is a great piece of material to bring to the board when you need to collect money to make an IT investment. When it comes to passing an audit, it certainly helps out in that regard. All right. Questions, anyone? I hope you all enjoyed. Scott, we have anything?
Yeah, Corbin, thank you so much. As I say, one polling question pop up, get that CPE credit. I know I'm very grateful to have Corbin on our team here at BMSS and Abacus, and I believe speak for everyone on the webinar. we're very thankful for the information you shared, Corbin. It's a very, very deep topic and presented very clearly and concisely. So yeah,
Thanks,
like
Scott.
Corbin mentioned, we'll begin taking questions from the audience. If you have one, please use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen and submit those, and we'll give those a second to pop in. There's one that's popped in. How common are extensions to SOC reports between audits? Sure.
Exceptions or extensions?
Yeah, it says extensions. I'm not sure I'm quite understand. Maybe it's the
Bridge
timing
letter
of the
situation.
timing. Yeah, it could be a bridge letter. Yeah.
So generally companies, as they're on a 12-month audit cycle, if something were to occur in that 12-month period that requires that you're not able to do the audit at that same time each year, generally you as the service organization will have to draft the bridge letter, but you're essentially stating to your clients that, to our knowledge, nothing has materially changed since the last audit, and you're probably going to provide a reason as to why you don't have your SOC report available to provide at that time, and when you do expect to go through that audit. So it is fairly common for something to occur that would disallow you from forming that audit at the end of your cycle each year.
Yeah. Along those lines, what is there a most common time frame that the SOC reports are performed?
For companies at the enterprise level, they're generally always going to have a 1/1 to 12/31 report. That's just what I've seen. I think it works best for their customers or they're doing their reviews at the beginning of each year.
Yeah.
And that's just the most common practice, but there's no outside of customer preference. There's no true reason it has to be a 1/1 to 12/31.
Right. A lot of those align with the financial reporting
Yeah.
timelines as well. At what stage does a company need a SOC report?
So that really depends. You know, if you're a startup company and say you're a software as a service provider and you're aiming towards enterprise level clients, uh, you've got to bite the bullet and go ahead and become SOC compliant at that level, because your competitors, which there most certainly are some, will have one, and as I stated earlier, that they're not going to look at you without a SOC report. You know, do your competitors have one? If they do, you need to get one. And as a small company, say in the startup stage, it's a lot simpler as the company grows to already be compliant and grow with compliance at the forefront of your mind than it is to try to make a large company become compliant. I'd say like, you know, turning a speedboat versus a cruise ship. You can take corrective action much quicker.
That makes sense. That makes sense. What about a custom SOC audit? Could you only focus on cybersecurity?
Yeah, there is a SOC for cybersecurity as a service offering. It's a little different than SOC 2 with security and scope. When we're looking at a SOC 2 with security and scope, we're looking specifically at a business unit, department, or application and scope. And if you do a SOC 4 cybersecurity engagement, we're really looking at the cybersecurity posture of the organization as a whole, and not tied to a specific service or application.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So say you're getting or about to get your first SOC audit. How far in advance would you recommend preparing or starting the
When we say,
process, I guess?
you know, starting the process, you know, I would advise against starting the process on your own. I would make sure that you have your auditor lined up and you've had those preliminary discussions so you know exactly what you need to prepare for. Just given the scope and how much work actually goes into this, in terms of dialing in how much time you're spending on preparing, you want to know exactly what you need to be preparing for in terms of the controls that are going to be audited. I would advise against using Google as your reference to prepare for the SOC audit.
Not even Chat GPT either.
I would advise probably more useful, but they're, or I guess fortunately for us, not providing the audit.
Right. Yeah, and I think I can kind of address this one a little bit. Are the audits something that should happen as the company grows? I would always say it depends. A lot of it depends on what your users and vendors or customers are requesting. So, anything you want to add to that, Corbin? Like you said, it's easier to start when you're smaller and get everything designed rather than starting when you're well established. But understand, generally people wait until they need it. There's a reason to have it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, um, nobody wants to go through this process. It's, I'd like to tell clients I'm not selling fun. And a lot of this is customer driven. And so they are doing it because their customers are requiring it. And quite frankly, they should be. Everyone should have some semblance of a third party risk management procedure. So I think it's just a little market research, talking to your clients, be the one to bring it up. Are you going to expect a SOC report anytime in the future? And just make sure that you are prepared to undergo that process when the time comes.
Yeah, agreed. Maybe time for a couple more as we wrap up. Can you fail? Can you fail a SOC audit?
Stock audits, they're not technically pass fail. They're not, it's not a certification. Some people say that they're SOC certified, and that's not technically accurate. We're providing an opinion on the design and or operating effectiveness of the controls and the system and scope. You can have a qualified report, which means that we have found a deficiency. A control did not operate as we expected it to, but that doesn't mean you failed the audit. You just didn't pass that specific criteria. But at a certain point, you can have what's called an adverse opinion, and that's as close as you can get to failing the audit. That's where we are saying there are pervasive control deficiencies. You've made material misstatements in your assertion and description, and an overall lack of remediation for known control failures. That's that's an F on the report. I've only seen one of those.
I believe I've seen one, no more than that as well. Well, we're about to hit our time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. If you have more questions or we didn't get to it, our contact info is there on the screen. But I just want to thank everyone for joining us. Especially huge thanks to Corbin for taking the time to prepare and share this information with us. If you're currently a BMSS client, we appreciate your trust in us. We certainly really do. If you're not a BMSS client, we'd love to have an opportunity to speak with you. Our contact information is there on the screen. You can visit our website at www.bmss.com for more information. Just as a reminder, CPE certificates will be issued in approximately 2 weeks, and a recording should be available on our website under the news and events section by the end of the day today. Again, I just want to thank you. You have about an hour and a half, I think, to get your brackets finalized. Good luck with everybody's brackets. Mine will be busted by the end of the day, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you.
We're eagle, everybody. Thank you all for joining.